Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yes, I am a colleague of Jessica Norberto Rocha. We work together in the... sorry, are you hearing me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah? Oh,
yes.
Sorry. We work together at the research group Museums and Science Centers Accessible, and I will present our work called Accessible Virtual Exhibitions of Brazilian Science Museums, Mapping Themes, Strategies, and Challenges. And this work is developed by Jessica Norberto Rocha, Letícia Marinho, Marcelle Pita, Willian Abreu, Taáte Thomas, and I. And we will include audio description throughout our presentation. And I will describe myself. So I am a Brazilian white woman with white skin, blonde hair, and brown eyebrows. I have blue eyes, and I use a black shirt in a white background. I have a big pink headphones, and the entire presentation has a white background, black text, and our colorful elements fall without the color scheme with blue, yellow, pink, and orange, and green. And this study was carried out by the research group Accessible Science Museums and Centers, is MCCAC. On the top left and right of the current slide, the name and the logo of the event and our research group, respectively. In the middle, the title of the study in bold font, and below the name of the authors. In the bottom right, an illustration of a computer screen with a map, the Saturn, and a dinosaur skeleton. So the COVID-19 pandemic brought challenges.
I don't know. Perhaps the organizer could help me. And now I have been able to activate my webcam, but I do not have Gabriela.
We have her. Do you hear me?
I hear you.
Mr. Betendus, do you hear us? All right. Sorry to interrupt you, Gabriela. I have to ask him to come back again. You may continue.
Can I continue?
Yes, you may
okay.
continue. Thank you.
So the COVID-19 pandemic brought challenges to engage science museums audiences. In the left, the slide, information regarding Latin America and the Caribbean. 3 percentages are present in different colors over a slim oval graph with gray background. In the right, a faded Brazil map. According to a report by the International Council of Museums, ICOM, out of 168 institutions, 52% were closed by October 2020, and museums and museums professionals were caught off guard, while the internet became the main means of communication between museums and their publics during the pandemic. Almost 50% started dedicated only 5% or less on the overall budget for online activities. And virtual exhibitions are amongst the solutions adopted by museums to continue the dialogue with their audiences. And 38 started or intensified their offering in online exhibitions. Now it's showing 2 percentages present in other colors. Norberto Rocha and collaborators, through a survey with 109 institutions, stated that 80% of them had websites, but only 32% provided at least one accessibility resource. Engaging online communication and providing accessibility are still very challenging for Latin America and the Caribbean museums. Now, it's highlighted in the right information of recent investigations about Brazilian museums professionals and the many struggles faced in the field. Mental health issues as anxiety and overburden follows the uncertainties aggravated by the pandemic. Since most of them work under temporary contracts, as well, the new online work dynamics brought in 2020. Some of the mediators don't have the necessary equipment or structures, and usually the institutions are not able to provide them. On the top of that, the lack of proper training in experiencing accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities lead to insecurities and poor communication process. In 2017, the publication of the Latin America and the Caribbean Accessible Science Museums and Centers Guide brought together information about physical, visual, and hearing accessibilities in 110 institutions located in 10 countries. You can access these and related publications through the QR code on the left or on the website bit.ly/MCCAC publications. On the right side of the QR code is the cover of the guide mentioned with diverse characters in color, age, and with or without disabilities. On the right, the Latin America map in gray and a Brazil map above it, each of the 5 regions in different colors. 69 out of the 110 institutions are Brazilian, distributed unevenly across the country. So, the methods of our research, the next slide follows the sequence. There are 3 circle topics placed horizontally. On each slide, the current topic is emphasized and the others are faded. To understand how science museums have applied assistive resources in their virtual exhibitions, we first mapped the virtual exhibits. This phase took place between June and July 2021 and considered the 69 Brazilian institutions that are available in the guide to accessible science and centers museums in Latin America and the Caribbean. We searched for virtual exhibitions on the website and the social media from the terms virtual visit, virtual exhibition, and virtual tour. After identifying the virtual exhibitions offered by each institution, we move on the individual analysis of each one. In this slide, the circle number 2 is emphasized, and for this, considering predefined categories such as assistive resources and institutions and geographic locations, and some categories that emerge from the data, such as the themes of the exhibitions and the types of media. And we think that it's noteworthy that the type of media used in the exhibitions directly influences the appropriate assistive resources for the application, an aspect that is considered in this study. And now the circle number 3 refers to assistive technologies, and we consider alternative text, audio description, screen reader compatibility, Brazilian Sign Language interpreter, keyboard navigation, sign language translation, narration, Portuguese subtitles, or English and Spanish version, and the contrast and font size adaptability. So our findings, the slide shows in the top right a table with 3 columns and 2 lines. The initial research on the websites and social networks of the 69 Brazilian science museums analyzed result in a total of 110 virtual exhibitions in 30 science museums. 9 of these exhibitions were excluded from the analysis because they had unavailable access during the search period, and thus, out of the 101 exhibitions, only 95 had at least one the evaluated assistive resources, being offered by a total of 25 museums. And this slide shows below the table 2 maps, like the previous one, side by side, but with only 4 Brazilian regions in colors. These 25 museums, in which we identify virtual exhibitions with at least one accessibility feature, are located in 4 regions of the country, with the exceptions of the Midwest region only. And the Southeast region has 7 accessible virtual exhibitions in 17 museums, and the Northeast region has 13 accessible virtual exhibitions. The North region has 9 exhibitions, and the South region has only 3. About the assistive technologies are also represented with a horizontal graph. Only 95 of the 101 virtual exhibitions present some action or accessibility resource, and almost of the exhibitions, 87, had at least the keyboard navigation. This high compliance with this criterion was expected as the feature uses the website HTML code for navigation. And this aspect also applies to screen reader compatibility. 62 exhibitions were found to be compatible after testing with the NVDA software, and 29 exhibitions offered narration in Portuguese, and 13 had subtitles in Portuguese. In 10 expositions, there was the possibility of changing the contrast and the font size. 8 offered audio description or alternative text in images, and only 6 presented windows with interpreters or translation software from the Brazilian Sign Language. It is important to emphasize that these findings, an exhibition could have more than one feature. So, our final considerations. We realize that accessible Brazilian science museums are already a limited portion considering the total number of Brazilian science museums. And of these, a few develop virtual exhibitions with some kind of accessibility, as discussed before. With regard to accessibility features, the low availability of content in Libras, the Brazilian Sign Language, and content with audio description is especially worrisome, as almost all the exhibits investigated were composed of text in Portuguese and visual resources. The most recent data indicate that there is about 7 million people with visual impairments in Brazil and more than 500,000 users of the Brazilian Sign Language. And this lack of accessibility in the virtual environment can aggravate the historical distance that this group suffers from museums. The analysis of assistive resources available in the virtual environment is possibly a reflection of the reality of the whole of museums educators. As Norberto Rocha and collaborators shown in a 2021 research with about 300 Brazilian museums educators, there is a long way to go towards inclusion, and almost half of the educators have never received specific training in accessibility and inclusion, and most do not work with public with disabilities on a regular basis. Added to that, there is still difficult in training museum educators to work in virtual spaces. And the implementation of assistive resources in the virtual environment depends on the hiring of qualified professionals and above all, the involvement of people with disabilities. So here are the references used in this presentation. You can access them all in the QR code in the right corner of the screen or on the website bit.ly/referencesmccac. And you can also find this full presentation and the document with all description at this link. And this is the last slide, is dedicated to present our research group, Accessible Science Museums and Centers Group. We are showing the logo of MCCAC Group, that is a colorful spiral with the abbreviation and the name of the group, and the name of our coordinator, Jessica Norberto Rocha, and her email, that is jessicanorberto@yahoo.com.br. You can find more information in the QR code or the link grupomccac.org. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gabriela Hack, for your very informative lecture regarding the museums, the Science Museum, in your very large country, enormous country.
Yes.
Geographically. I was wondering while you were talking, I was wondering that this virtual approach for the people to access the museum, is it a new program in your country because of the situation worldwide, especially COVID-19, or is it a normal, a usual program, whether the COVID is there or not, you will continue?
There are some virtual exhibitions before the COVID-19, but we perceive that after the COVID-19, there are intensified resources in the virtual media, but they are not still accessible to everyone. So this is why we are doing this work to understand what and how the museums are adapting to the virtual media and adding the accessible resources.
Thank you very much.